Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Grid Radio, the podcast without an intro, where we talk about things which go. I'm your host, Nihan, and I'm bringing you an episode of Sidepod. So just a quick update on Malachi. He is still at Wimbledon with it still ongoing, hopefully to finish this Sunday with a Sinner and Alcaraz final. That's going to be interesting to see a rematch of Roland Garros. But alas, we are not a tennis channel, we are a motorsport racing channel. So let's get into that. The first thing we're going to cover is the upcoming 6 hours of Sao Paulo at the Interlagos circuit. A lot of you Formula One fans will be quite familiar with that. Extremely iconic, with quite a few iconic races. We had 2021 Lewis Hamilton. We had Felipe Massa, where he lost the title to Lewis Hamilton in 2008, I believe. So yeah, just an incredibly historic track with loads of different memories. And this weekend, you get to see prototype manufacturers racing it out there for the overall win. Ferrari have been hit with an absolutely monstrous BOP of 12 kilograms added to their weight, and that puts them as the same weight category as the Toyotas, and that's going to be interesting to see how that shapes up. And we also it's going to be interesting to see the Cadillacs, who are extremely strong at Le Mans, and whether or not they can carry that form through, and obviously the Alpines, who before Le Mans had a double podium streak at Imola and Spa-Francorchamps. We have a lot of Formula One drivers at Interlagos, with K-Mag, who was on pole there at one point in F1, Paul di Resta, Mick Schumacher, Robert Kubica, Antonio Giovinazzi, Jenson Button, I believe, as well, just to name a few. And it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. I expect some tight racing, and anything can happen in 6 hours. We have had two really good 6-hour races, with the 6 hours of Imola and 6 hours of Spa-Francorchamps, both which were exhilarating all the way throughout. So please do tune into that on Sunday. We also have the LMGT3 class at the 6 hours of Sao Paulo, and 92 first form Porsche leads the championship, and Richard Lees will still be the main driver of that team. Putting in the most junior driver, the most experienced. It's going to be interesting to see, whether with the showdown between the 92 Porsche, 46 BMW, and whether or not we can get another car in the mix. The McLarens were extremely fast at the 24 hours of Spa, so whether or not they can bring that over. And also the Aston Martins have been looking extremely strong as well. That's going to be interesting to see. And moving over to IMSA, we have the GTD Pro and GTD classes at the Chevrolet Grand Prix in Canada, so quite a bit north of Brazil, but still in the America's continental region. This time the north. And it's going to be interesting to see, with the number 7 Porsche Penske in the lead, with Felipe Nasser and Felipe Nasser and Nick Tandy. And then we had the sister number 6 Porsche, which is one of the drivers of which is Matt Campbell. So it's going to be interesting to see, how the Porsches perform. They were absolutely slaughtered at the 6 hours of Watkins Glen, picked off, and it's interesting to see how that happens with the BOP. So, my understanding was it leads to closer racing and closer competitiveness between teams, not that it makes one team sitting ducks and the other team absolutely monstrously fast. So I think that kind of needs to be changed, rather than, one weekend we have the Porsches absolutely dominating, one weekend we have the Cadillacs absolutely dominating. We're going to see close racing between all manufacturers. And we kind of saw that in WEC at Spa, and we also saw that at Le Mans with the different conditions, but then the conditions obviously ended up favouring the Ferraris as the track wrapped up more and more and more. So yeah, that'll be interesting to see. And also bear in mind at Le Mans there was no implemented VOP; it was just homologated race cars. But now moving on to Formula One, we had the British Grand Prix over the weekend at Silverstone, where Lando Norris completed his victory. We had an Oscar Piastri drama, and I think this was the main headline, which us F1 fans, long time ones especially, felt the most pleased about was Nico Hulkenberg's podium, and that in a Sauber, which was just ridiculous. And not only in a Sauber, he started P19, so just absolute chaos at the British Grand Prix, and a sensational drive from him, keeping the car on the track, avoiding silly mistakes, and just being consistent, and that's what you need to be in Formula One. And I'm so happy for him, even though as a Ferrari fan, Lewis didn't get the podium, but it's happy to see Nico there on the podium. Now moving on to second place, Oscar Piastri. He did get the penalty, in my opinion. Like, even though I want Piastri to win the World Drivers' Championship, it was deserved. He braked a bit too harshly in more dangerous conditions, caused Verstappen to spin, etc., etc. But I think Piastri needs to also draw the positives from the situation, where he was beating Lando at his home race. He out-qualified Lando, and he was leading for the majority of the race up until that penalty. And some people are arguing, why did he ask to swap the cars and stuff? But like, people need to bear in mind it's a racing situation. It's high pressure, and obviously people are willing to do a lot of things to get the win. And you just he just asked the question, but I'm sure there will be no hard feelings between the McLaren drivers, and I'm sure Norris understands the position Piastri is in, and it was good driving from Norris as well. But again, he needs to sort out what happens at the end, because he looked extremely strong through free practice, strong through Q1, Q2, and then just drops the ball in Q3. And he really needs to stop doing this, because we know his race starts aren't the best, and we saw Hamilton pouncing on the back of him earlier on. And I think if it wasn't for the raw speed of the McLaren, he wouldn't have much shot at the World Drivers' Championship. And to be honest with you, I think that if McLaren aren't as competitive, or more teams are just as competitive as McLaren next year, this will be his last and only shot at a World Drivers' Championship with McLaren. He lost it last year, and Piastri seems to be improving exponentially, and he's showing no signs of stopping every race. He's becoming more mature. Yes, there have been one or two odd mistakes, but he's incredibly young, and his raw potential, in my opinion, is just a lot higher. Whereas Lando has been focusing, about building an image outside of the sport. There's like his Quadrant YouTube channel. He had a Lando Norris stand. Yes, he's got the fan base behind him, but then he's I don't necessarily think he has all the skills. Yeah, I'm not saying he doesn't have the potential. He does, but it's just that he needs to find a way to bring it out more consistently as Oscar, and be a bit more of a mature driver, especially being at McLaren for so many years and being what many consider to be the senior driver. You would expect a lot more to show for it, like we did last season. And it's just a bit disappointing to see, that he may not win the World Drivers' Championship this year. But Lando did do a good job, still keeping his nose clean, and was able to capitalize on Piastri's mistake there. But I feel like Lando Norris fans are gonna hate me in the comments or whatever. A lot of Lando Norris fans hate me for my opinions on McLaren, but even as a Brit, I think Piastri is the better driver, to be honest. And he's got a great manager in Mark Webber. He's gonna ensure that he has that fighting chance, and I think it's very good. but Bortoleto looked quite good, out there until obviously it was tricky conditions. But now I know, if he's going to be trying gunning for another podium, it's unlikely because the conditions and how the race played out with the safety cars favored Hulkenberg. But especially if both of them are going to be driving for Audi next year, both of them backed by a manufacturer constructor like Audi, who has a lot of experience in hybrid electrical systems with their e-tron lineup, which is a commercial lineup they have. Um, it's going to be interesting to see, and I really think Bortoleto will get his chance to shine, and he does have a manager in Fernando Alonso, who's extremely experienced with a few World Drivers' Championships himself, and the oldest driver currently racing in Formula One, as well as just being an absolute beast, putting that Aston Martin in places where it shouldn't be. So yeah, Bortoleto is one of the has done some extremely good rookie performances as we saw at Austrian. He's got an extremely promising future ahead of him. We also saw some strong performances throughout the grid. I mean, Verstappen was complaining about the car throughout the race, and it could really show him with his lack of control. But he did manage to come in fifth and fourth, and Lewis Hamilton obviously coming in fourth, just extremely solid, looked extremely aggressive. Just unfortunately couldn't convert the aggression to the win. But one thing to note just quickly between Piastri and Norris, that even with 10-second penalty, Piastri was only 7 seconds behind Norris towards the end, which, you know, um, he had the opportunity to win, and without the penalty, I think he would have much definitely. And we had Pierre Gasly finishing sixth, so an extremely good drive for him. And I think this is the first time Lance Stroll has beaten Fernando Alonso. Aston Martin came seventh, Alex Albon in eighth, Fernando Alonso in ninth, and George Russell in 10th, which is his second best finish at the British Grand Prix, believe it or not, which is incredibly interesting. It was a bad run of luck for him. His previous best finish here being fifth in the Mercedes. So yeah, just an incredibly disappointing, an incredible amount of disappointment from him, especially considering how consistent he's been this season. And we had Ollie Behrman in 11th with the Haas. We saw the Haas' synchronized dancing at one point, where Ocon and Behrman, would when that turned together. Carlos Sainz spinning the two in 12th place. Luckily, his car didn't catch fire this weekend. I mean, Charles Leclerc did risk with the strategy, a few tire miscalls and stuff. And I think Charles Leclerc has really shown his weakness in the wet, and he's not the only driver to do that, but it's something he really needs to master. And I think that's what a lot of drivers who have raced in that bad weather and experience, like the French, like we saw Pierre Gasly, and the British like Lewis Hamilton, and Lando Norris drive extremely, extremely well. Sonoda finishing a lap down and not being very promising, and finishing last out of the cars, which did finish the race. Lawson and Hajar, doing a good job. I mean, we saw Hajar go out, and he seemed to pick up his wet weather driving performance from Australia. But again, another DNF, and maybe that is something he does need to work on. But it's going to be, they're all promising rookies, and it is their first season, and obviously that is the excitement of Silverstone, how the weather plays a factor. It's going to be interesting to see how they progress. But we do have big news at Red Bull, where Christian Horner has been released from his duties, and it's quite sudden. We heard about Verstappen moving to Mercedes, and we don't know if it's to prevent Max or as a result of Max moving to Mercedes, so that's not confirmed yet. But it'll be interesting to see now what happens, because Christian Horner has been there since the inception of Red Bull, been there around for 20 years, giving them so many race wins, so many titles and stuff. And obviously there was some controversy with him around him, but I'm not gonna get into that here. But nevertheless, he was a good team principal, and really backed the Red Bull team and bringing a lot of talent. But we have seen so many senior members of Red Bull depart, and like especially at a regulation change, do they really want to do that, let go of that experience? Or maybe they're trying to rebuild the Red Bull brand, but with Helmut Marko still, that'll be very intrigued to see how that goes. But Red Bull are bringing in with a man with a lot of experience, with Laurent Mekies, a Frenchman who will take over Red Bull, who was the Racing Bulls team principal. And just him being French, I wonder if that increases Isaac Hadjar's chance, a fellow compatriot of Laurent Mekies, of racing at Red Bull in the second seat with Verstappen in the coming season, and whether Tsunoda will be dropped and Vinblad be brought into the Racing Bull seat around Lawson. Will Lawson be dropped and Tsunoda be brought in? It's going to be interesting to see what happens with that. And then also with the Racing Bulls team, it's going to be interesting to see kind of how that shapes up. If they will see a management change there as well, and their new CEO is now and principal is Alan Perman. After Mikies took the reins at the parent team, it's gonna be interesting to see how Racing Bulls change as well. Whether they start to split a bit more the two teams rather than acting as a feeder team. Because so far this season, the Racing Bulls squad has been a lot more consistent than the Red Bull team, and they've shown for that, scoring a lot more points than the Red Bull team, and the car just being so undrivable. Like we had Max complaining about it as well, just being absolutely ridiculous to drive. And we saw that with how snappy the car was behaving. But yeah, we have this whole driver market crazy madness, and with Cadillac not even announcing Bottas yet, I keep on teasing it. We don't even know who's driving at Cadillac, and there's been news about Bottas replacing Colapinto mid-season, Doohan coming back, and if Bottas and Cadillac will strike a contract with Alpine to give Bottas that driving time for the rest of the season, just to be in a bit of practice when he comes to the Cadillac team the following season. And it's going to be interesting to see as well who's going to be in that second seat. There have been a lot of talks, around Mick Schumacher, Checo Perez. I would like to see, Bottas and Schumacher, because you have a senior, experienced driver who isn't necessarily going for a World Drivers' Championship, yet has raced alongside a multiple World Drivers' Champion, and can really help mentor Mick Schumacher and hone a lot of his skills. Because we saw a lack of mixed maturity in the Haas. Like we saw a few inconsistent performances, but he's been doing extremely well in work. Where he's been driving extremely well in the Alpine, really taking the battles to Ferraris and really being on pace with some of the platinum graded drivers. Where you have the comfort and ability to not do so well in your first season, they would love to invest in a younger driver program, especially with Mick Schumacher. But it wouldn't make sense to put Bottas and Checo both in the same team, because they're both like number two drivers, you could say. And I don't necessarily think Cadillac need the cash injection and sponsors that Checo was bringing, especially being a factory works team and being even though it's not officially, but Andretti Racing popping up the team. It's going to be interesting to see what unfolds in the coming weeks, and then the following week, and you have the Spa Grand Prix, Belgian Grand Prix at Spa-Francorchamps, one of my personal favorite European tracks, with Oruge and Radion, and it's going to be an extremely exciting race, and I just can't wait. And also, we were to see kind of Vinblad with the Formula 2 support series there as well. So, yeah, guys, thanks so much for tuning in. Please do like and subscribe, and turn on notifications so you are tuned in for our next episode.